Mr. Chairman, and I want to follow up on your previous answer, Dr. Sullivan, but before that I want to join the Chairman in thanking you for all your service. I really liked reading in your testimony about your view from the shuttle showing the interconnectedness of all the systems. So following up on your last answer, Dr. Sullivan, according to some weather experts and people who have raised concerns about proposals to reallocate significant resources from NOAA's climate and ocean investments to weather forecasting. So I noted in several places in your written testimony where you caution us against actions to increase one important mission area to the detriment of NOAA research programs in climate or ocean science. So will you please explain how climate and ocean research and research flexibility are critical to NOAA's mission of providing more timely, accurate weather forecasts?
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. I'd be delighted to do that. Let me open by saying that weather forecasting and the forecast services that protect American lives and livelihood are already NOAA's highest priority. They are encoded in national security functions that we are directed to fulfill by the President of the United States in support of the Commerce Department's mandates. So they stand already far head and shoulders above many other things that we do. How is this flexibility important? How does it help us? Let me cite our Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program to give you an example of that. This was assembled after a spate of landfalling hurricanes, very devastating hurricanes. We brought together academic, federal, outside researchers and forecasters. We looked at the spectrum of underlying causal factors, what patterns in the atmosphere lend to the formation of hurricanes, shape them, steer them, stop them, what phases of things do we need to understand. The answer is a mixture of things, ranging from understanding decades-long oscillations in the Earth that put the Earth sometimes in a phase we're in now, where the Atlantic Basin is very active, and then a few decades later in a phase when the Atlantic Basin is not very active. That's a deep underlying heartbeat of the planet. To know the predictability of hurricanes, we need to understand those kind of longer-term heartbeats. But to really get track and intensity right, it's also clear on the other end of the scale. We need to have models that can resolve the actual inner core of a hurricane very precisely. So this Hurricane Forecast Improvement Project set out an array of research endeavors coupled to this purpose across that time scale. They cross-check regularly and frequently which ones are advancing. They created a stream that could advance and yield benefits to forecasting with the operational supercomputing assets in place at the moment. And they yielded a second stream that could take us even further if we could step ahead the capacity of the operational supercomputer, like way ahead. And then they created another stream to bridge them and make sure that we didn't leave good results sitting on the sidelines for any longer than are necessary. The flexibility of this sort of integrated team to move those pieces back and forth under a broad charge given by the Congress to get better at hurricane forecasting, hit these targets by these times, and then the throttle setting that the Congress can allow us each year in the appropriations has really made that a tremendously fruitful program. I think that's a great model to emulate.
Thank you. And this is similar to the Chairman's second question. Based on your years of experience and your expertise, what changes, if any, should be made to the structure or processes at NOAA to provide continuing improvement in weather forecasting? Are there some structural things that could change that would help improvement?
We're trying to make some of those now, and I think a couple others could help. Again, I would cite the Hurricane Forecast Improvement Program. It had many strands of activity under it, but it was agreed upon with the Congress at the level of the program and then appropriated at that level each year. That, in my view, is a sound and healthy balance of the rightful prerogatives of the Congress and the flexibility needed to adjust programs as they evolve and deal with setbacks when they occur, as they will in the research arena. We have also, I think, if we can improve the way we all look at keeping NOAA's operational supercomputers closer to the cutting edge, we would find a great improvement there. And I'll give you one great example. We have research models running. In fact, the research model that runs under the hurricane program cannot be put into the operational supercomputer right now. So during hurricane season, we run the National Hurricane Center, and we run this research model in real time because we can't fit it into the operational supercomputer. We should be able to fit it in. We have a model that could have forecasted last year's derecho 12 hours in advance. It did. It did, but it was running in research mode. We need to be able to move those more rapidly into supercomputing rather than waiting so long for big step functions in our supercomputers.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Dr. Sullivan, and I see my time has expired. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to this very distinguished and knowledgeable panel of witnesses. In some of the testimony, it mentioned 3 reports, recent reports that have studied how we can improve weather forecasting, one from the National Academy of Science, one from the National Academy of Public Administration, and then NOAA's own Scientific Advisory Board. And in those reports, they did discuss the issue that you brought up, Dr. Chen, about the moving innovation and research from labs to the weather forecasting operations. My impression is that there has been a lack of communication and an inability for those entities to connect, and that's something that hopefully we can address through this legislation. But I wonder, could you talk also about other recommendations in those reports? Are there recommendations in those reports that could help improve the legislation? Because we all have the same goal here of improving weather forecasting. Can we make use of those reports in other ways? Do you want to start with Dr. Chen and then the others?
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on that. There has been many studies from the National Research Council, and each report recommend almost exactly the same thing. We need a systematic approach to research, from research to operations, and to transfer the innovative technology. Our current system so far has not worked as well. Like I mentioned, the research and the operations are somewhat separate. So I think this particular panel and this particular bill could help us to address that in terms of providing that mandate, perhaps a national advisory board. Even though the funding has been appropriate to do this work, right now the problem is the structure that are not allowing the smooth transition from the research arm of NOAA to the operations, and more importantly, from the research community from outside, a lot of from academia and private sectors, we have not been able to making that transition to NOAA because the system are not allowing that flexibility. I think that.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. And Dr. Gail or Dr. Droegemeier, do you agree with that? Do you want to add to that? But the information in the reports that may help inform the legislation.
Yes, these are all excellent reports and provide a substantial basis of community input upon which legislation could be based. Helping NOAA move forward with implementation of these recommendations within legislation, I think, would be a very valuable thing.
Thank you, Dr. Droegemeier.
Thank you very much. I think we do have some exemplars of these kinds of test beds that truly are integrative, where you bring in the operational folks, they're already there, you bring in the academics, you bring in other researchers, and they all work together toward the common goal. And not being parochial, but the one we have in Oklahoma truly is unique, because we have the university co-located, as Dr. Sullivan said, with an OAR lab, with national operational centers, plus a forecast office. When those folks get together, wonderful magic things happen. And that sounds a little trite, but it's really true. And I think we can replicate that model.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Sullivan agreed with you in her
yes,
testimony. So,
thank you.
And there's a requirement in the draft legislation about the OSSEs. And can you explain briefly other kind of evaluative tools that might be used? There's a requirement that may be too constraining, we heard in the testimony. So if anyone wants to address, are there other kinds of evaluative tools that might be used instead of OSSEs, and is that flexibility important?
I can address that real quickly. There are a variety of techniques and tools, one of which Dr. Sullivan mentioned is the adjoint technique. Basically, it tells you where the forecast error will be large and where you need observations. What's important about that is you can, if you're not careful, put observations where, in fact, they're going to degrade the forecast, because it will put errors where you don't want errors to be and grow. And sometimes these other assimilation techniques will actually create observations where they don't exist, and you actually don't need observations. So it's a very, very complex problem. We need to understand it. And I think the only thing that we're saying is basically there's many tools available. Probably let the scientists decide which ones are most appropriate. We're not at all discounting the value of OSSEs. We're just saying there are other techniques used in concert would be helpful.
Thank you. We heard testimony about that flexibility. And in my remaining time, I just want to follow up on the social science research that Dr. Droegemeier, you talked about and the Chairman mentioned about the importance of how to communicate. Of course, the timing is important, but the message is important as well. So it was an issue in Katrina as well, how that communication is and how we get people's attention. So maybe if any of you want to, in my remaining time, just add how that research can be furthered through this draft bill, please.
In the remaining 2 seconds.
Sorry, I'm out of time. Well, I yield back, and maybe I'll ask for some input in writing from the witnesses about that important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.